The Miller's family was the kind of household people nodded toward with casual envy. A neat lawn, a dog named Scout who barked at passing cars but never bit, birthday parties that filled the driveway with balloons, a Thanksgiving table long enough to seat in-laws, step-cousins, and even the occasional neighbor without anyone feeling like an outsider. Todd Miller was an accountant, dry in conversation, precise with his routines, but well-liked at his firm. Denise, his wife, was a former nurse turned stay-at-home mom. They met at a second chance seminar for divorced parents, and after a year of cautious dating, decided to build something new out of the remnants of their old lives. Each brought a child into the marriage. Todd came with Jake, quiet, thoughtful, more comfortable with books than conversation, a boy who never quite settled into the rhythm of teenage life, who once told a teacher that most kids his age exhausted him. He had no history of violence, no outbursts, no signs of trouble, but there was a flatness to him that unsettled even the adults who praised his manners. Denise had Lily, 16, sweet, the type of girl who would bring home strays and beg to keep them. She was quick to hug, quicker to forgive. She wore oversized hoodies and painted her nails in mismatched colors. Her laughter filled hallways. Her presence lingered, not because she demanded attention, but because her kindness made people want to stay. Jake and Lily met as step-siblings when she was 12 and he was 16. At first, their relationship was defined by the kind of polite distance parents hope for. Separate bedrooms, separate friend groups, a few shared meals, and an unspoken agreement to stay out of each other's way. But something shifted in the months after Jake's high school graduation. He didn't go off to college like his classmates, said he needed time, said he wasn't sure what he wanted. He spent more hours in the house, in the basement, on the back porch, sometimes just sitting at the kitchen table long after everyone else had gone to bed. And Lily, who once teased him for being too serious, started spending more time in those same places. First, it was casual, helping him fix the Bluetooth speaker, watching a show together that none of her friends liked. Then came late-night snacks eaten side by side, long silences that didn't feel awkward, conversations that drifted from homework to secrets they hadn't told anyone else. It's easy to see the signs in hindsight. Lily's texts became more guarded. Her browser history was scrubbed clean every night. She began deleting photos from her phone that included her friends and started posting fewer pictures of herself altogether. Her grades dipped slightly. Nothing alarming, just enough to raise a teacher's eyebrow. And Jake? He started locking his door, started showering in the middle of the night. Once, Denise found one of Lily's hair ties on his nightstand. He said she borrowed his charger. She believed him. It wasn't that their parents weren't paying attention. They were. But they were looking for the wrong things. The usual warning signs. Drug use, mood swings, defiance. What they didn't see was the quiet erosion of boundaries. The slow unraveling of something that had once been harmless. One evening, Denise walked past the living room and saw them curled up under the same blanket. She paused, her instincts flickering for a split second. But Jake stood up immediately, muttered that Lily had fallen asleep during a movie, and carried her to her room like a protective brother. Denise smiled and turned off the lights. From that point on, whatever line once existed between them had been crossed. Not loudly, not brazenly, but subtly, and once crossed, it vanished. By the start of Lily's junior year, they were inseparable. Her friends joked about it, called Jake her shadow. But behind the jokes was unease. One girl told her mother she stopped going to Lily's house because something was off. Another noticed that Lily had started wearing makeup to breakfast when Jake was home, but never when he wasn't. Then Lily missed her period. Once, then twice. She didn't panic right away. She told no one, not even Jake. She waited, hoped, prayed. When she finally took the test, it was positive. She cried for hours, not just because of what it meant, but because of what she knew she would have to do next. Tell him, tell her mother, explain something she couldn't fully understand herself, how something so wrong had felt, for a moment, so real, so warm. What she didn't know was that Jake had already seen the test. The crumpled wrapper she thought she'd hidden in the trash, the box she forgot to burn, and in that moment, Jake Miller made a decision, not to come clean, not to confess, but to make sure she never told anyone else. There's a difference between affection and fixation. At first glance, it can be hard to spot. A longer than usual glance, a laugh that lingers too long, a conversation that seems innocent but is punctuated by silence that means more than words. That's how it started. Inside the Miller household, Jake and Lily's relationship slowly tilted into territory no one dared imagine. They shared inside jokes their parents didn't get. They had a playlist they curated together, songs no one else was allowed to hear. They exchanged books with underlined passages, quotes marked not for their literary merit, but because they meant something, private meaning, hidden context. And then it slipped into the physical. It didn't happen with fanfare. There was no dramatic confession, no sweeping gestures, just a touch that lingered on Lily's wrist too long, a moment on the back porch when the world went quiet, the kind of stillness where decisions are made without words. That night, Lily didn't sleep in her room. It wasn't every night, not at first, but it became more frequent, more deliberate. Doors closed, lights off early. The distance between their rooms, 12 paces, became a hallway of secrets. They were careful. At least they thought they were. Text messages were deleted as soon as they were read. Calls were made only when no one else was home. They invented errands, trips to the store for one forgotten item, walks with the dog that lasted just a little too long. Jake started borrowing her notebooks. She left coded notes inside. What neither of them realized was that secrets, the kind built on shame and silence, don't stay hidden forever. They collect weight. They take up space. They change you. Lily, who used to be so open, began retreating inward. Her smile became mechanical, her answers shorter, her presence dulled. Denise noticed, but chalked it up to adolescence. Hormones, the stress of school. She asked if anything was wrong. Lily always said no. Then came the physical signs. The nausea was subtle at first. Lily blamed it on the cafeteria food. Then came the fatigue. She started skipping breakfast, left school early twice in 1 week. She began wearing hoodies even in warm weather. Her face grew paler. The light in her eyes dimmed. The first time she threw up in the upstairs bathroom, she locked the door and ran the shower to muffle the sound. Jake stood outside, his hand on the knob, frozen. She told him it was the flu, but he knew. The truth wasn't abstract anymore. It was growing inside her. When she finally told him, they were in his car, parked in the back of the grocery store lot. It was raining, the kind of rain that seems to make the world disappear behind a sheet of water. She whispered it. "I'm late." Then, "I took the test." Jake stared ahead, hands gripping the wheel like he was bracing for an impact that hadn't arrived yet. She watched him, waiting for a response, a question, anything. But he said nothing. 3 days passed. When he finally spoke, it was through a text. "We'll figure it out." No plan, no comfort, just words meant to delay panic. Lily, for all her affection and trust, had hoped for more. A promise, a gesture of protection. But what she got was silence. Long pauses between replies. Sudden disappearances. Jake, the boy who once listened to her talk about her dreams for hours, now avoided eye contact. He kept to himself, became colder, detached. What she didn't know was that Jake was unraveling, but not from guilt, from fear. He wasn't afraid of being caught. He was afraid of losing control. This wasn't a high school scandal to him. It was a threat. A living, breathing reminder of everything he couldn't undo. A secret that could destroy the carefully balanced illusion of his life. He'd spent years building a version of himself that was quiet, unassuming, invisible. The kind of person no one suspected. No one accused. No one watched too closely. Now Lily was threatening to expose it all. And Jake began to believe the only way to keep his secret intact was to make sure she never told anyone. He didn't say it aloud. He didn't have to. His silence spoke volumes. Each day that passed, Lily became more isolated. Her phone buzzed less. Her friends noticed she didn't return messages. She drifted in class. Her teachers wrote comments in the margins of her papers. "Is everything okay? You seem distracted today." She started writing in a journal, not because she thought it would protect her, but because it was the only place she could tell the truth. She wrote about the fear, the shame, the confusion, how something that once felt so intimate now felt like a trap, how Jake no longer looked at her the same, how she wasn't sure who he really was anymore. He knew her habits better than anyone, knew the glass she always used, the one with the chipped rim she refused to throw out, knew she always drank juice right after school. It was a ritual as consistent as her morning alarm, and he waited. For days, maybe weeks, Jake rehearsed the moment in his mind, not the act of violence, not overtly, but control, precision, the little details that would make it all look like anything but what it was. He chose a Friday. Their parents wouldn't be home until late. Lily had no plans after school. She would walk through the door just after 3:30, toss her backpack near the stairs, and head straight to the fridge. She always did. That morning, Jake left early, claimed he needed to run errands. Instead, he stood in the kitchen alone, grinding 2 tiny pills to dust so fine it vanished against the bright color of the juice. A prescription meant for anxiety. In high doses, something else entirely. Lethargy, slow breathing, a shutting down of the body from the inside out. He placed the bottle in the fridge, labeled it with her name in casual Sharpie letters, then waited. The hours moved like syrup. He played games on his phone, paced, looked out the window. When he finally heard the front door open, he didn't greet her, didn't smile, just listened. Footsteps, the fridge door, the clink of glass against the counter, the faint sound of juice pouring, and then silence. A long, awful pause. He peeked from the hallway, just enough to see the glass in her hand. She took a sip, a deep one. He turned away. Lily didn't notice anything. She sipped again, and again. Within minutes, the dizziness started. Her movements slowed. She gripped the side of the counter, confused. Her voice, barely audible, called his name. He didn't respond. She staggered toward the living room, panic rising in her eyes. She collapsed by the couch. Only then did Jake reappear, this time breathless, frantic, fumbling for his phone. His voice was high-pitched, almost shrill. He told the 911 operator she'd collapsed, said she might be having a seizure. He sounded terrified. He knelt beside her, placing a trembling hand on her forehead, whispered her name over and over. The dispatcher asked if she was breathing. Jake hesitated. I think she's not, he said. He gave an address. A heartbeat passed, then another. The line went dead. Jake stood up, looked down at her, and blinked, then turned toward the door, calm again, just as planned. At first, it looked like the flu. That's what everyone thought. She was curled on the floor, moaning, body clammy, eyes darting from corner to corner. Vomit soaked her hoodie. Her legs twitched, erratic. Then came the screaming, sharp, primal, barely human. Jake knelt beside her again, repeating her name, louder this time, as if he could drown out the sound of her agony with false concern. The 911 call had already been made, the story was set in motion, and all he had to do now was keep up the performance. By the time the paramedics arrived, Lily was barely conscious. Her skin had gone an unnatural shade of gray. Her breathing was shallow, ragged, like her body was forgetting how to function. Her pulse was barely there. The EMTs moved fast. Oxygen, fluids, questions he answered with frantic shrugs. They didn't notice his eyes, dry and focused, tracking every move with eerie precision. She was rushed to the emergency room. No one suspected anything. Not yet. Doctors did what they always do in a case like this. Stabilize first, investigate second. But stabilization didn't come easy. Her kidneys were already failing. Her blood was acidic, her vitals unstable, and her consciousness flickering like a dying bulb. They intubated her, ran tests, checked for infections. One nurse, halfway through a routine physical, paused. Something about Lily's abdomen. It was subtle, but the swelling was there. Blood work confirmed what the nurse suspected. Lily was pregnant. Roughly 10 weeks along, it changed everything. The doctor stepped into the waiting room with the news. The room went silent. Lily's mother broke down immediately, the kind of weeping that comes from the gut. Raw, stunned, full of questions. Her husband tried to steady her, but he wasn't any better. The words hadn't even sunk in yet. Jake stood still. Too still. He didn't say anything. Didn't blink. His eyes dropped to the floor. When asked if he knew anything, if Lily had said anything to him, he shook his head slowly. Nothing. Not a word. Later, he'd tell police he was as shocked as anyone. Said he never knew she was sexually active. Said he barely noticed any changes in her. But the autopsy would reveal she had confided in someone. There were letters tucked in her backpack, unmailed, handwritten. Some of them addressed to Jay. Some of them pleading. One asked him to tell the truth. Another said she was scared. Then came the toxicology report. It was supposed to rule things out. Instead, it revealed something chilling. Antifreeze. Ethylene glycol. In her system. High concentration. It had attacked her organs from the inside out, flooding her with a slow, invisible death. It was sweet to the taste, undetectable in juice, and it killed in stages. First nausea, then confusion, then seizures, then the kidneys, then the heart. Someone had planned this. Someone had wanted it to look like an accident. Antifreeze isn't stored in that house. Not in the garage, not in the shed. The family didn't keep it on hand. Police began to ask questions. They asked who had been home. They asked who poured her drink. They asked who had motive. Jake, still playing the part, sat with his arms crossed, his head bowed. He said nothing, offered nothing. But the walls were closing in. Her blood told a story, and soon it would speak louder than anything Jake had to say. The poison had moved silently through her veins, but the investigation didn't. It screamed. It clawed. It cracked the calm like thunder at noon. In the days after Lily's death, detectives walked quietly through the Miller home, not with sirens or accusations, but with eyes that missed nothing. The kitchen, the trash, her bedroom, his. Nothing was left untouched. Jake stuck to his story. He'd been watching a movie. She had poured the drink herself. He hadn't noticed anything unusual. He mourned on cue when asked. He showed up to the funeral with the same blank expression he wore when she collapsed. But something didn't sit right. Not with the coroner. Not with the ER nurses. And not with Detective Clara Mendoza, a 17-year veteran of the department who'd spent enough time around liars to feel the air change when one entered the room. She requested Lily's belongings. Among them, a backpack, a phone, and a locked diary. It took time to crack the passcode, but once they did, the story began to bleed through the pages. One word at a time. The entries started innocent. School notes, doodles, gossip about teachers. Then, halfway through, came a shift. It was a different tone, a different voice. One entry simply read, "He said it'll ruin everything if I tell. But it's already ruined, isn't it?" Another, "If Mom finds out, she'll hate me. She'll hate us. The U.S. The shared guilt." Then came the message circled in red ink. "I missed my period again. That's 2 months now. He said it's okay, but I don't feel okay." Detectives traced the initials, the timeline, the implication, and then they pulled Jake's digital history. What they found turned the quiet murmur of suspicion into a thunderous scream of evidence. His laptop, buried deep in a search history he thought he'd erased, contained query after query. Symptoms of antifreeze poisoning. How to induce miscarriage secretly. Can you go to jail for sleeping with your stepsister? How much ethylene glycol to kill a person? The bookmarks folder was filled with links to obscure forums, chemical suppliers, and old Reddit threads buried in paranoia. He deleted messages too, but the cloud remembered. Forensic software recovered fragments, enough to piece together late-night chats with Lily, some affectionate, some tense. One in particular caught the eye of prosecutors. "You promised you'd help me. Now I'm just scared. You said we'd figure it out together." Then silence. No reply. Nothing after that. Enough was enough. On a rainy Thursday morning, detectives pulled up to the automotive supply store where Jake worked part-time. He was on his lunch break, standing behind the counter with a soda in hand. He didn't resist, didn't flinch when the cuffs clicked shut, didn't speak as they read him his rights. He looked down at the floor, same as he did when Lily's pregnancy was announced. Like the world beneath him had something better to offer than the truth floating all around him. Back at the precinct, the interviews began. One officer offered him a coffee. He declined. Detective Mendoza leaned in across the table, dropped a printed copy of his search history in front of him, and simply asked, "Is this how you helped her?" No response. No tears. Just silence. But silence in this case was confession enough. The house he tried to bury the truth in had become the crime scene. The lies he stacked so carefully had collapsed under the weight of a single girl's diary. And the poison that moved so quietly through Lily's body, it now screamed through every piece of evidence they had. One decision born from desperation and fear altered the course of countless lives forever. A single lie whispered in shadows, unraveling trust and tearing apart the fragile threads that held a family together. One drink, innocent in appearance, deadly in its intent, became the last breath of a 16-year-old girl whose future was stolen before it ever had a chance to bloom. Lily was more than a name. She was a promise unfulfilled, a voice silenced too soon. Behind closed doors, the smiles that once masked pain gave way to a truth no one wanted to see, because the truth was a sharp edge cutting through every facade. Her memory lingers in the hearts of those left behind, a haunting reminder that even in the most ordinary homes, darkness can dwell unnoticed, and danger can wear the guise of family. If you or someone you know carries secrets too heavy to bear, if the walls around you echo with whispers of control or fear, reach out. Speak your truth before silence becomes the final sentence. Because sometimes breaking the quiet is the only way to survive. This story is a warning etched in pain, but also a call to courage. Don't let fear win. Don't let silence be the last chapter. Lily's life ended with a lie, but her story will not. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and join us as we uncover more stories hidden in the shadows, shining light on the darkest corners of human experience. Because every truth deserves to be told.